sunshine I gotta love, and I know that it's all mine. Oh.
Hi there, my name is Hillary, and in today's tutorial, I'm going to give you some tips on how to quickly render using Revit. I'm going to show you how I kind of quickly fake render and how to actually use the render function in Revit, and then also how to use Enscape, which is a super simple plugin for Revit and really user-friendly. I was going to show you how to use Twinmotion, and then when I was trying to download it again, it kind of made my computer have a seizure, so I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to explain to you how to do it, and it's almost the exact same as Enscape, so it should be pretty simple for you to figure out. Today I'm going to be using a really simple tiny house Revit model that I haven't opened in like 3 years. So to begin, I'm going to show you how to create the views that you're going to use as vignettes or perspective views. So I'm going to go into a plan and I'm going to click View and the drop-down menu for 3D View, and I'm going to click Camera. And then I'm going to click once for where my camera or my person is standing, and then I'm going to click again to show the extents of how far I can see. Then it's going to open up automatically. And this usually happens when it opens, it's going to be kind of weird. So I can adjust this by pulling these extents. This is how wide my camera angle is. And this can kind of get a little bit finicky. Sometimes if you play with this too much, it's going to seem really not like a human way of seeing. But I can adjust it in plan as well. I can move my camera like this. Now, if I click out of this, that's going to disappear. So you need to be clicking on this window for the camera to show up in plan. And then I can change the direction that I'm looking. And then in section, I can change the height of my camera. So I'm just going to make sure my section is looking at where the camera is. And I'm going to go back to here so I can see the camera, and I want that taller. So here we go. So that's how you make a perspective view, and then you can change the target elevation and your eye elevation here in the properties panel. I'm just going to open some that I've already played around with. So here's one, and here's another. This one's a kind of a good example of what not to do, because this is really stretching it, and this is making the space look so much bigger than it actually is, which could be helpful. But it looks very odd because we're really warping the view. So when I am going to fake a render or a vignette, and I usually make it kind of stylized in Photoshop, which I prefer anyways to the realistic renders, but it's just, this is a strategy that's really helpful if you need to just whip something out really quickly and you can't wait for the computer to render and you can't spend the time setting up your render to make it look good. So you're going to want to export a line view and a shaded view, and then maybe a rendered view, all separate. And then you bring those into Photoshop, and they should be the same size. And so you can just put those on top of one another, and then that's your base file to then Photoshop and add like textures or color blocks and things like that. So I'll just show you really quickly to make the line view that I'm talking about. You make it a hidden line view like this. And you want to make sure there's no shadows, otherwise it will raster your image, and we want it to be a vector. So I'm going to turn off shadows, and then I'm going to go File, and I can either print to PDF like this, Microsoft Print to PDF, set your location, and then say current window, okay. Or you can, if you want to mess with the lines a little bit, you can export to CAD, and then you can have that as a DWG. So you export this, because it's a PDF, when you open it in Photoshop, it will just be lines and no like white background, which is nice. Or you can bring it into Illustrator, select all of those lines really quickly, make them a thinner line weight so that it's a little bit more delicate, and then bring it into Photoshop. Either way, it takes like no time. And then your second view that you're going to want to export is a shaded view without lines. So I'm going to make this shaded. I'm going to get rid of show edges, turn on these fun shadows, mess with the lighting a little bit, and then click OK. So now I have this view. It's kind of weird with the colors that Revit automatically assigns to some families like the windows, but this will work because obviously we can adjust those in Photoshop. So I'm going to go File, Export, and for this one, I'm going to export it as an image. And what I find is the best, to get the best quality is I'm going to say zoom to 100, make this lossless, and then 600. And I'm going to leave it on current window. So that is my settings that I use to make sure that this is the best quality that it can possibly be. And then I'm going to click OK. And then if you want to use the render function, you just click this render right here, and then you can adjust these settings. So sun only, sun and artificial light. I didn't put any lighting fixtures in here, so it's not going to have any artificial light, unfortunately. And then you can adjust the sun settings and if there's clouds and the exposure, etc., and the size and the resolution. And then you click render. It is going to take a little bit of time depending on how big your project is. So I recommend using the render function if you're doing exterior vignettes or renders, because with the interior, if you don't have artificial light, it's going to be really dark. But for the exterior, it can look really nice with the glass, and especially if you have like a curtain wall and the sun shining through the windows and things like that, and you have the sky, and if you have trees, they look really nice as well. Because in your 3D view, if you add trees, you might have noticed this before, the trees that Revit automatically adds look really ugly. They are like this. And you would think that's going to be an eyesore in my render, but if you click the view render tool, it's going to look like a real tree, whatever type of tree you picked. So here's my examples of an exterior render. This is just the shaded view with those exact same settings that I just showed you, removing the lines and then upping the ambient light and the shadows. And then this is the same view with just clicking the render view, not adding any textures or anything. It's just going to give me those trees, a little bit more natural lighting, and some sky. So this is what I used, and then I'm going to show you what the result was after some photoshopping. So I'm sure when I zoom up this close, you can tell how simple this is and how kind of idiot-proof this is. Once you have those two views and your line view as well, you can see in this one, I just inverted the lines so that they were white and then put on really simple, easy textures. So here's some stars and a moon and some white that's all faded and some people and some context that I took from Google Street View. So it's really, really easy. Ew, this looks disgusting when I zoom in. And then I use the other one, the not rendered view, as to do a daytime one. And again, just sticking on textures here, just like a concrete texture, and then just bright colors and just people from Google. So these each probably took an hour, and I didn't have to wait for any sort of rendering, whereas other people spent 24 hours waiting for their render to render in Vray, just to then have to Photoshop it on top of there as well. So now I'm going to show you how to edit materials. So this is what's going to actually make a difference when you click the render button. So for your building elements that are floors, walls, and roofs and ceilings, they're made up of layers. So I can, for example, click, and when I go into edit type and then edit structure, this is the thickness here. And I can insert, for example, another layer and say up so that it is a finish. And I can add something here. So now I can add a new material. So I'm going to say red brick. And these are the graphics for when you're doing like a shaded view, but when you're actually going to use the render tool, this is the information to go along with that. So you can see that you can add an image, glossiness, and then I also like to use the tint. So I'm just going to Google a texture that I want, red brick. And you want to make sure that you're Googling seamless texture, because otherwise it'll look like really patterny. So once you find one that you like, you're just going to save it. You're going to save it as a JPEG. And now in your material, you can click image. And now you can find the seamless texture that you downloaded. So I can make the image fade, add glossiness, etc. So I'm just going to leave it how it is and see what happens. I'm going to click OK. So this is what it looked like when I changed it to realistic. And I must have added this finish to the inside of the wall. So I'm going to say edit, and I'm going to move it down, and that should be the exterior of the wall now. Yep, so now you can see this. So this realistic view is going to show you the textures of your materials without fully rendering them. So it can load really, really quickly. And this looks disgusting because it is way too small. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to go back into the editing the material, red brick, click on that little guy. And I'm going to change the size of my image by clicking this down button, edit image. And this is where I get the size. So that is 1 foot, which is not what I want. So you can scroll down in this, and we can change this to be whatever size we want. Okay, so that looks a little better. And now if, for example, I wanted it to be a different color, I can go edit. And we can use this tint function. And sure, let's tint it a little bit gray. Click OK, OK. And now it's a little bit gray, which looks a little odd because the grout is now also gray. But sure, we'll see how that looks. So now if you were to click render, you would get that material showing up. So that rendered in like 10 seconds. So this view, after some time spent editing the materials, this is what it ended up looking like. So this actually didn't take very long at all. All I did was Googled wood paneling seamless texture, white, and I found that, and I messed with the size a little bit, and it worked pretty well for the walls, and I liked that, the way that that one looked. So I used the same one on the roof or the ceiling and tinted it to be sort of orangey brown, and then I used it and I made it a smaller scale, used the same texture and just tinted it a little bit differently and messed with the scale a little bit as well for the floor. And that's all it was. And then I just clicked the render tool and this is how it turned out. And it did not take very long. And then I figured I might as well show you this as well. This was a little exploded AXO that I made for this project. And this was using the shaded tool. So this was, again, after applying those really simple textures. I just used the shaded settings that I showed you earlier and unclicked show edges. And then I just adjusted the section box so different parts of it would show, exported that as an image, and then threw them all in Photoshop, made sure they were the same size, and then added these little dots in Illustrator. Took no time at all and no waiting for anything to render. So now I'm going to show you a little bit about Enscape. So Enscape is a plugin for Revit. Unfortunately, the free trial is only 14 days, but you can get a student license for free. That's 6 months. Not great, but time it well. And it is a free download. So once you have Enscape downloaded, it's going to automatically show up here. Because it's a plugin, it knows to show up in your Revit tabs. So I'm going to click on this tab. And you have to be in a 3D view. So I'm actually going to go to here. And you have to specify which 3D view you're going to start in. And then I'm going to click Start. And Enscape is going to pop open. If you don't have a license or anything, you're going to have 3 boxes pop up. And if you want the free trial, you're going to click Continue on Restricted Mode. And then I believe there's going to be a little watermark of the Enscape logo on the bottom corner. But if your Enscape trial expires, there's going to be watermarks everywhere and it's basically unusable. So now this is what it looks like when it pops up. So the controls are written on the bottom here. So you can kind of turn around like this with your mouse. And then you can use the letters on your keyboard to kind of zoom in and out. As you can see, the tree is looking like a real tree. And this is obviously way more responsive and quick than if you were to try to do this in the render tool. It takes a little bit of getting used to with these controls, but so this is rendering it how the render function would. So for example, the sink hardware here is rendering as if it's metal. I think I added a gloss to some of these finishes. Can spend so long playing around in here. It's a lot of fun. But so if I close this, I'm just going to show you some of these settings. But if I go to visual settings, my personal favorite is just to change this and put it to white mode. So if you're not going to spend all that time adjusting the textures, the material textures, which you probably won't do, you can just make it white and everything will render white, and it's pretty fun. So this is what it looks like when it first opened. And one good thing that I love about Enscape is even when I don't have lighting fixtures in, it does a really good job of just adjusting when you're in the interiors and giving you some ambient light, as well as the light coming through the windows looks super cool. And you can adjust the time of day as well in those settings that I showed you before. So I think this looks really cool, and it's a really good way to show how much detail you put into your model if you put in detail. And if you didn't, it looks really cool from the exterior as well. So we did this for housing. I never actually submitted it because I thought it was so simple, and I totally regret it because somebody else had a little video and it was like realistic pretty simply, and the props and the visiting critics were obsessed with it. So anyways, all that to say, just do this and it will blow their minds because some of them are old and they don't understand how this works, and they just think you're a wizard and they don't realize that it's so easy to do. Anyways, so you can use this obviously as a visualization tool to show your props, or you can use it to create a video. So what you do to get your video working is I didn't close it, so I just minimized it. I just clicked video on off, and now you can see that the tools changed here. And so I'm just going to get it in the placement that I want. So as you can see, it's kind of frustrating to use the tools or the keys on your keyboard to move around. It's kind of like hard to get used to, but the good thing is you're just setting keyframes when you're creating the video. So then when you watch it back or you click preview, it will be super perfectly smooth. But a tip on this is it will just kind of zoom through from one keyframe to another. So I recommend adding a keyframe right before a door, adding a keyframe right after a door so that it knows to go perfectly straight through. So I'm going to add a keyframe, and then basically you adjust like this timestamp for the next one. And I'm going to go through. Add a couple more seconds, add keyframe. And now I'm going to click render video, and this is how it is going to save. That took a while. Okay, this is slower than I meant it to be, but the good thing about making it slower is if you want to throw this into Premiere Pro, it is going to have this good quality throughout it. Whereas if you render it too quickly and you try and slow it down, it's not going to be as smooth. Our tree going through the wall, but you can just see how clean it is. So there you go, that is an Enscape video and it's so cool. And then lastly, I'm just gonna explain to you how Twinmotion works. You can get it as a plugin or separate. So this is where you download Twinmotion. They also have a free student trial, and it is with Epic Games or Unreal Engine. So in order for to make Twinmotion work, so if you don't have it as the plugin, you can just export your project, and you go File, Export, and then you export as an FBX. Then you just open Twinmotion, and it's a super intuitive user interface, and it's almost like Enscape, especially with the way that you move. It's super easy, and you can do the exact same thing where you set a camera path and then you render that video. And just like Enscape, in Twinmotion, you can edit the time of day, and Twinmotion, you can also add in like people and cars that like, and you can set them to have a path that moves. And the one thing with Twinmotion is that when you want to, you have to like apply settings to it once you bring the FBX into Twinmotion. So if you already have the settings really well set up in your project, like all of the materials, I would recommend using Enscape. But if you want to do that separately in Twinmotion, it's super, super simple. So I hope you guys learned something today. I hope this saves you some time at the very least. I hope that this helps you if you find Vray really hard to use, and if you're using Revit and you don't want to have to bring it into Rhino and then use Vray. Thanks, I'll see you next time.
For the sunshine, I gotta love, and I know that it's all I know.